Hey guys, it's Jeff from Pressure Luck, and as you know, I recently polled my audience, my readers, you, my viewers, and I asked what they wanted next. Chicken dish was the most popular, so last week I released Jeffrey's favorite chicken. The second most popular on the list was soups and stews. So I said, you know what, I have it in me to make a really interesting, different style beef stew. My beef stew is one of my most popular recipes. It's really good, okay? It's just loaded with flavor. It's that classic hearty, tomato-based, rich and meaty, loaded beef stew that you come to know and love with the carrots, the potatoes, we got it all, and thick, delicious chunks of melt-in-your-mouth chuck roast in there. So I said to myself, why don't we try kind of the opposite of a beef stew, and we keep the beef, but we make it a creamy beef stew, and we'll just call it white beef stew, because I think that would be really interesting to give it a little bit of a makeover in terms of what the stew itself is. We'll keep the classic carrots and potatoes in there because I feel like that's definitely relevant to a beef stew, and it needs it in there to really get it going. But as for the broth, this completely changes the flavor profile. It's delicious. It's gonna give it something like a nice, smooth, creamy edge to it, but not over the top to the point where it's like, this is just too rich for me. It's gonna go down perfectly. And the best part is at the end, you could choose to really kind of season additionally how you wish. I think the way I provide the seasonings are great, and they work really well. It'll not taste over salty, but it'll be just the right amount of savory. But if you wanna add your own little touch at the end, I got you covered in Jeff's tips in the recipe card. Just check on the little yellow, but Jeffrey's tips, at the bottom of the recipe, you'll see the recipe card. So let's go right to the Instant Pot very easily and make some amazing, delicious white beef stew. Okay, so the very first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take between 1.5 to 2 pounds worth of either chuck roast or beef stew cubes. I actually do like chuck roast and cutting it into chunks about this size, but you could always, of course, just get the stew, meat cubes, it's already done for you. But the reason why I like to use chuck is because I usually find it to be a little bit more coursed with some fat throughout. It's gonna create more tender beef, melt in your mouth, and release even more delicious flavors into the stew. Okay, but regardless of which you go for, about 1.5 to 2 pounds, put it in a large bowl here, and I'm gonna add to that 1 teaspoon each of garlic powder and rubbed sage or dried sage, it's the same thing, and 2 teaspoons of Italian seasoning. And then get in there with both hands and just mix the meat up with the seasonings. All right, perfect. And we're just gonna set that aside and come back to that in a bit. Now I'm gonna go to my Instant Pot and I'm gonna add in 3 tablespoons of salted butter. Now let's come down to the control panel and hit the saute button and then make sure we're on the more or the high setting. Okay, and once the butter begins to melt, I'm going to add in 1 onion. You could use really any onion of your choice, a medium-sized one. This is actually like a Vidalia or sweet onion, but you could use a yellow or Spanish onion, that's fine. As well as about 3 ribs of celery, and I've just diced them both up. Both, not both, both. And then I'll saute my veggies in the butter for about 3 minutes. All right, now we're looking good after about 3 minutes of sauteing. Now I want to add in 3 cloves or 1 tablespoon of crushed or minced garlic. And I'll saute that for another minute in the pot. Okay, we're looking great. Now I want to add my seasoned meat to the pot. And I'm going to saute my meat with my veggies until it just becomes lightly brown for about a minute or 2 in the pot. Okay, and you see after about a minute of sauteing, the edges get lightly browned. Now I want to add in 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour. And I'm going to stir the flour so it coats everything in the pot, basically. Just mix it up in there. Marvelous. That looks great. Next up, I'm going to add in 3/4 cup of sherry wine. You can also use a dry white wine like a Chardonnay or Sauvignon Blanc. And if you don't use wine, you're just going to add in 3/4 cup of broth in its place, any broth you choose. We're going to let our flour-coated meat and veggies just simmer in that wine for about a minute until it begins to bubble a bit. So they get thickened up as well when that happens. Okay, and after about a minute of everything bubbling in the pot, we want to get to the bottom, and you can see the bottom of the pot's going to be a little bit sticky with some of the flour and wine mixture. That's all going to come up in just a moment. So what I want to do now is I want to add in 2 cups of a broth of your choice. I like to use chicken or garlic broth for this. Just start by adding a little bit of the broth because we want to deglaze the bottom of the pot with that broth. Really get in there. Make sure the bottom is nice and smooth, nothing thicker caked onto it. Really get it going, okay? And then pour the rest of that broth in there. And then again, really get in there and scrape the bottom of the pot. We want it to be nice and clear. So just to recap in terms of liquids, I use 2 cups of broth now and 3/4 of a cup of sherry, or again, you can use like a dry white wine like I said earlier, but if you're only going to use broth, you're going to use 2 3/4 cup. Use that 3/4 of a cup first when we were adding the flour. And now, when we add all the broth, make sure the bottom of the pot is nice and smooth, which it will be, and it should be. Now we're going to top our broth off with, I used 2 carrots that I peeled, and then I cut into about 1/4 inch or so discs thick, and then I just cut up half most of them, as well as 1 to 1.5 pounds of baby potatoes. I leave the skins on, and I just really slice them in half where I can quarter them, so they're basically this size, like bite size. I just want to pour those on top. I don't want to stir, I just want to pour those on top. And now we're ready to pressure cook. I'm going to take my lid, and I'm going to seal it and secure it. And I'll come back down here to the control panel, hit cancel, then hit the pressure cook or manual button depending on your model. And I want to go for 20 minutes at high pressure. And then that's it. And now that we're done pressure cooking, we're going to allow a 10-minute natural release. That means we do nothing for 10 minutes after it's done pressure cooking. And this is going to begin to count up to 10. And now that 10 minutes of natural release have passed, we'll finish this off with a quick release. And the pin just dropped, so we're going to take our lid off. Okay, we're looking good. All right, so now I want to give everything a good stir in the pot, and we're going to put our finishing touches on. First thing I want to do is I want to add 1 cup of heavy cream. And my cream was in a really cold refrigerator, so it's a little bit clumpy right now, which is totally fine. As long as the expiration date says it's fine still, and it doesn't have a weird smell, sometimes heavy cream can do that. But once you pour it and add it, it's going to be just fine. We're going to hit that cancel button, and then we're going to hit the saute button, and once again, I'll make sure we're on the more or the high setting. I also want to add in a 1 ounce package of a ranch seasoning mix. I do love me the Hidden Valley. 1 packet of that, a whole ounce. As well as either a 5.5 ounce package of Boursin, any flavor, it's an herb cheese, or a 6.5 ounce of tub of Alouette, or you can make your own, about 3/4 of a cup if you make your own. I'll link where. This is like an herb cheese. It's amazing, it adds rich flavor, and it's perfect for this stew. Stir everything around in the pot until everything is combined. You could give it a little bit of a thicker consistency by adding a cornstarch slurry. You use equal parts cornstarch and water, cold water. So in this case, it would be 1 tablespoon cornstarch plus 1 tablespoon cold water, which I stirred together to form a slurry, and add it, 1 tablespoon of each. Look at how perfect. And then we'll hit cancel to turn that pot off. And my final ingredient is going to be 2 teaspoons of a Cajun, Creole, or Louisiana seasoning. And I like Tony Chachere's for this. Any flavor will work just fine. Put that in there. This is the way I like to send it home. And another nice touch is to toss in 1 to 2 teaspoons of celery salt. That's only if you choose to add it. You can taste the soup right now and season it up however you wish, but always start with less of any type of savory ingredient because it's really hard to retract that once it's added. Start with less and you can always add more. And now we are ready to ladle into bowls. Let's do that up. And there is my delicious white beef stew. Gotta get the little edges, just wipe it off. That's what they do in the restaurants, you know, when your food is being presented. They use a little, you know, paper towel, they wipe it off to make it look all pretty. These things are gonna definitely drop on the sides. And there it is, white beef stew. Don't forget, and I highly suggest getting some cheese bread, like a cheese toast. I like that with my beef stews in general. And put it inside for dunking. You're gonna want that. All right, let's serve it up. And there it is, white beef stew. And let's give this a try. Okay, it's already thick and rich. So let's try this out. Let's try it with some of just the meat first. Just like that, melts in your mouth like butter. You almost don't even need teeth to eat this meat. Like it's that soft and tender. Same with the carrots and the potatoes, but I love that they still hold their form. That's why we add them at the end. We don't mix them in. Plus also mixing them in could also cause issues with building pressure. We don't want that to happen. So good. The broth, the stew. It's perfect. And of course you got that cheese toast to dunk in there. This is a very very different, unique approach to a beef stew. But I think it's delicious. I dig it. It's comfort. It's not overkill in terms of any saltiness. It's not over salty at all. And at the very end, when you're adding that touch of Creole or Cajun or Louisiana seasoning, and if you want to, instead of that, you can use seasoned salt. You could start with, 2 teaspoons and then work your way up if you feel like you want to add more. But I personally don't think it needs it. And don't forget, as any soup or stew cools down in the fridge, the flavors come together even richer the next day. That's how it works. It's how it is. Because when everything gets hot, everything gets like dispersed, and when everything cool, it comes back together. Think of it as kind of like shrinking in a way. Like everything shrinks and then it re-expands when you heat it. So when it re-expands, it already shrunk to each other, and that's how I make it up in my head anyway. A really good, delicious, comforting, decadent meal that's hearty for the entire party. There's really something about like the sherry also being a nice foundation for the broth. I just keep eating the meat. Do you see this? It's like basically melting in your mouth. That's why I love it so much. By the way, if you wanted to get it fancier, you could also use short ribs with the meat and just cut it up at the end. That works too. Like my shortcut short rib stew in my super shortcut book. The green one. Like, speaking of which, books. I've written 4 books. 4! That's a lot of book right there. That's a lot. We got the orange one, the original. We got the blue one, the lighter, which was the second one. We had the yellow one, which was the simple comfort food, easy comfort food. And now the most recent book, Super Shortcut Instant Pot, the green one, comes out in April of 2023, April 11th. Which is really soon from now. It's like just practically 2 months away till this is gonna reach you. You're not gonna wanna miss this. It's my easiest, quickest cookbook yet. Even easier and quicker than this recipe, if you can believe that. But trust me, it's in the book. Follow me at Facebook. I'm like old school with that stuff. Like facebook.com/pressureluvecooking. Give that page a like. Make sure you're seeing everything first. You don't wanna miss when a new recipe comes out to save you on time and stress and money in a lot of situations. And you don't want to forget when I'm mentioning a great deal on things. You don't want to have FOMO, which means fear of missing out, in case you didn't know what that meant. You don't want that. So this page will ensure that you get all in on all the tricks and tips and delicious foods if you follow it and see it first and favorite it. At Pressure Love Cooking, follow me on all the other social stuff, YouTube, Instagram, I got it all. Thank you so much again, my friends. And the next time you want to make a stew on a very chilly night, well, you could always try some beef stew that's red or white. Enjoy. I gotta work on those rhymes. But it is really good.